What began as a summer between two boys on the water has carried across a decade of silence, whispers, and the ache of what was never said. They have come back together, not only in memory, but in the open, where family and friends have begun to see what had always been true. From the cliffs of their youths to the Sunday tables of Eden, they stood side by side at last. But now the tide has shifted again. An offer waits in Sydney, a future not yet built, a question still hanging in the salt-heavy air. Will Kai choose to stay where he has always belonged, or stepped into a life beyond Eden with Noah? The question didn't vanish when the harbor quieted. It stayed, caught in the gull's cries, pressed against Kai's chest with every breath. If I asked, would you go with me? It was the kind of question that couldn't be shrugged off. A question that demanded an answer, even if Kai wasn't ready to give one. And before the night ended, he did. This is Salt in Our Veins, Chapter 6, The Tide We Choose. The final chapter, where the ache of waiting meets the promise of tomorrow. Noah's words hung there. If I asked, would you go with me? Kai's jaw tightened. He looked at the harbor instead of Noah. I can't, he said finally, the words rougher than he meant. My whole life's here. Noah didn't flinch, didn't push. He only gave the smallest nod, as though he already expected the answer. Kai shifted, searching for something else to say, but the words wouldn't come. And Noah, after a long moment, turned away. I'll see you tomorrow, he murmured. Kai watched him go until the sound of his footstep faded into the night. The next morning, the harbor was already alive. A blast of horns cut across the wharf. Kai looked up, just as a cruise ship pulled into harbor, a white giant looming over the smaller boats. Tourists lined the rails, cameras raised. He watched them spill onto the docks. Strangers in white hats, kids pointing at the sea as though they'd never seen it before. Their laughter echoed off the water, foreign and loud, so different from the quiet rhythm he always knew. Kai's grip tightened on the ropes. His life was here. But sometimes he wondered what it would feel like to step onto a ship and not look back, to chase horizon instead of hauling nets, to belong to the world instead of one town. The thought lodged in his chest. A guilty flicker he tried to smother with work. By noon, the sun was high, sweat streaking Kai's back. He was tying off a line when a familiar voice called behind him. Brought you lunch. Noah stood there with 2 sandwiches wrapped in butcher paper. His shirt sleeves rolled, hair catching the light. He didn't push, didn't mention last night. Thanks. Their eyes met for a moment, steady, lingering, before Kai looked back down at the bread in his hands. They ate quietly. Every so often, Kai felt Noah's gaze on him, patient and searching. And each time he forced himself to focus on the ropes coiled at his feet. When the food was gone, Noah brushed his palm clean, still watching him. You'll wear yourself out, Noah said lightly. Work doesn't wait. I need to finish this. Noah didn't argue. He just nodded, his gaze holding Kai a moment longer. Kai hesitated, then added almost offhand. Beer tonight? That broke the heaviness between them. Noah's mouth curved, quick but real. Yeah, tonight. Kai watched him walk down the pier, then looked past him to the cruise ship easing back from the dock. It's that crowded with waving passengers. The ship moved slowly out to the sea, growing smaller against the horizon. Kai turned back to the net in his hands, but his fingers hesitated, the rhythm gone. The rope felt heavier than it should have. The bowline was dim, warm with the smell of beer and sea air. The sound of the jukebox threading through the low voices of the few fishermen who lingered past supper. Kai slid 2 pints onto the table and sat across from Noah. The foam traced slow rivers down the glass. Neither of them said the word Sydney. They filled the first stretch with safer talk. Noah asked a question here and there, nodding, smiling at the edges, though his eyes held something heavier than his voice. At some point, Noah leaned forward, his elbow against the table. His eyes caught Kai's, a spark of mischief breaking the careful distance. "You smell good." Kai blinked, almost choking on his beer. "I smell like rope, sweat, and a day under the sun. That's not good." "That's what makes it good," Noah said, grin tugging wider. His voice dipped lower, almost playful, almost serious. Kai looked away too quickly, heat climbing his neck. He muttered something about the jukebox being off-key, but Noah didn't push it further. The conversation circled on. They talked more with pauses than with words, silences that stretched long enough to feel like confessions. More than once, Kai felt Noah's eyes on him, lingering. Each time, he took a longer drink than necessary, the bitterness of the beer doing nothing to steady him. The bartender flashed the lights once, the Bowline's gentle way of saying, "Last orders," then home. Noah tipped his chin toward the door. Kai nodded. They drained what was left and stood. For a second, as they reached the doorway, their shoulders touched. Neither moved. Outside, the night took a deep breaths around them. The street was mostly dark, just a string of low lamps. Kai glanced at Noah, at his open shirt collar, at the way the lamplight caught on the edge of his jaw. He heard himself say, "Race you." Noah blinked, surprised into a laugh. "You'll lose." "Big talk for a city boy," Kai said, and then he took off. Their feet slapped the quiet road, both of them stumbling on their first sprint, then finding a rhythm that had more to do with being 17 than anything they'd trained since. Noah tried to cut a corner. Kai's shoulder checked him with a grin and kept going. "Cheater," Noah panted. They barreled down the end of the block where the road met the low wall by the wharf. Kai slapped the stone first and doubled over, hands on knees. Noah stopped a step later and leaned on the wall, laughing, head tipped back to the stars. Kai wiped a forearm over his face, heat in his cheeks that wasn't only from running. They stood there, catching breath, trading small insults that landed like touches. Their laughter thinned. The quiet came back, not heavy at first, just present. They walked a long way. Their shoulders brushed once, then again, until it became a pattern. Kai didn't step away. Neither did Noah. Noah's voice came, as if it had been building since the first spear. "Do you really want another 10 years of this?" He didn't look over when he said it. He kept walking, hands in pockets. Kai's jaw worked. "You only think about yourself. This is my life. You get to leave and come back when you want. I'm the one who stays. I've got nothing out there." The sentence left him was more in it than he intended. The fear, the pride, the smallness, and the safety all knotted together. It felt like handing over something he wasn't sure he could take back. Noah didn't rush his answer. He stepped closer by half a pace. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "You'd have me." The night went very still. The reasons he lined up like fence posts fell over in a row. He forced out, "It's not that simple." But even to his own ears, it sounded smaller than these things Noah had placed between them. They started walking again. The road widened. The porch light at Kai's place drew a weak circle on the ground, like it always did. They stopped at the gate. For a second neither moved. Noah's eye held his, steady and searching, not demanding. Kai felt the run still in his legs, and the beer still in his blood, and the ache of 10 years, like a muscle he never let heal. Noah stepped in. No warning, no ask. Just a kind of sure pull that said, he knew it could be refused, and did it anyway. His arms came around Kai. Firm, careful. Kai froze for a heartbeat. Then he let himself lean, just a little, and his hands found Noah's back. They stood like that longer than either of them would admit later. Noah's cheek brushed Kai's temple. I care about you. About us. Just think about it. We can build something, if you let me. Kai held on. He wanted to say a dozen things, and none of them were sentences. Noah eased back first. He didn't drop his hands right away. He searched Kai's face. Then he nodded, small as if to himself, and stepped away. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. Kai watched him go until the dark took him. He stood a long time at the gate with his palm still warm from where it had pressed into Noah's back. The tide sounded louder than it had an hour ago. The house behind him was the same house. The road in front of him was the same road. Kai barely slept. Every time his body gave in to the drowsiness, Noah's words stirred him back awake. You'd have me? The line repeated. When dawn edged over Eden, he gave up. He pushed himself upright, sat on the edge of the bed with his face in his hands, and exhaled into the stillness of his room. The routine carried him like it always did. Bread was a thin scrape of jam. Coffee strong enough to keep his hand steady. His mother's shoes were already gone from the mat. She left early, as she often did. Kai pulled on his work shirt and stepped out into the chill that clung before the sun took hold. He walked toward the docks. He slipped into the familiar rhythm, checking ropes, testing knots, mind half on the work and half far away. Is this it? He wondered, watching the water slap the pilings. Is this how it always be? Nets, sails, lessons, bread, coffee, harbor, the same sunrise, the same silence. For years, that question hadn't mattered. This morning, it pressed harder than the tide. Noah woke on the sound of knuckles on his door. His mother's voice followed. You still asleep? It's nearly noon. He groaned into the pillow, his body aching in ways it had him for years. Not the beer. That had burned off long ago. It was the run. The sprint through Eden streets. The laughter that had carried him harder than his legs were ready for. He felt it in every stride of muscle, like he borrowed his 17-year-old self and had to pay it back. By the time he dragged himself down the stairs, his mother was already dressed to go out, earrings catching the light as she adjusted her scarf. She smiled at him, shaking her head. Lunch is on the table. I made enough for you and your father. Don't let it sit. She kissed his hair, slipped on her shoes, and was gone, leaving the door to click shut behind her. The kitchen smelled of bread still warm from the oven. Pan-fried fish, the sharp cut of pickled onions. His father was already seated, shoulders squared, his own plate half full. Noah chewed slowly, not sure whether his father would say anything. He had grown up with silence from him, the kind that said more than words, but left everything unsaid. Halfway through the meal, his father set down his fork. His eyes were steady when they met Noah's. If something matters, he said, voice low, you don't wait on it. You already lost enough years. Noah froze, a slice of bread halfway to his mouth. Roots keep you steady, his father went on. Don't let fear trick you into wasting what you believe in. Not again. The words landed heavier than no one expected. Not just advice, but something closer to an unburdening. His father had never spoken this way to him before. Not about life. Not about love. Then his father leaned back, folding his arms. Since you're leaving in 3 days, we've spoken with Kai's family. They'll have us for dinner tomorrow, Saturday. He paused, letting it sink in. And before you go, we'll have our Sunday brunch here, just the 3 of us. Noah stared at him, stunned. He swallowed hard, setting his fork down. His father had already returned to his meal, as if nothing monumental had been said. But Noah sat straighter. It was no longer just a question of what he wanted. The time for waiting had ended. Noah stood under the shower longer than he meant to, water sliding hot over his shoulders, pooling at his feet. It wasn't the running ache in his legs anymore, or the soreness in his chest from laughing too hard 2 nights ago. What pressed at him now was heavier, sharper, the knowledge that by the end of tonight, things could be different. How do you ask someone to change everything when you can barely name the fear yourself? He dressed with a care, shirt pressed, collar neat. He combed his hair twice. In the mirror, his reflection stared back, unsettled, restless, but resolved. He straightened, exhaled. Tonight, there could be no retreat. Kai's family home glowed warm against the dusk. The smell of roasted fish, garlic, and herbs spilled through the open window. The table was already crowded. Kai's father sat at the end, steady, quiet, surveying everything with his expression that could be mistaken for sternness. The conversation was lively, ordinary. Who had caught what that week? Whose boat engine had failed? Which neighbor had painted their shutters an awful color? Kai laughed easily, shoulders shaking at his brother's mimicry of a fisherman's tall tale. Noah watched, and in that watching understood. This house, this table, this atmosphere. It was why Kai found it so hard to imagine leaving. Here, belonging wasn't a word. It was a rhythm, an inheritance, a net cast wide and strong. And in the same breath, Noah felt a tug of doubt in himself. If Kai followed him to Sydney, could he give Kai something that felt less rooted? The fear burned sharper than the roasted spices, but beneath it, an ache rose higher. He didn't want to take Kai away from this. He wanted to build something together that could stand beside it. The realization lodged in his chest, alive, unshakable. Outside, dusk had settled into true night. Kai walked with Noah into the front yard. Kai didn't speak. He only looked at him. I know what this house means to you, what this family means. And I know if you followed me, you wonder if I could ever give you the same. He exhaled, chest shaking. I don't know if I can. Not yet. Kai's gaze flickered, but he didn't look away. Noah stepped closer, his voice firmer now. But I want to try. I want to build something with you. Not just pull you away into a life that feels smaller, but make a new one with you. One that holds us both. Noah's hand trembled as he lowered himself to one knee, the gesture pulling memory with it. Prom night, years ago. The first time he had ever let himself ask. Back then, it had been a dare, a joke wrapped in nerves. Tonight, it was everything. The porch light caught Kai's face, stunned, trembling. Noah looked up at him. Come with me. Let's build our life in Sydney. Eden will always be our root. We'll marry here. We'll come back every winter. But it's time to start now. Kai's breath caught, his lips parting as though words might come, but nothing did. Kai, will you marry me? Finally, Noah said it. Kai nodded. The front door creaked. Kai's mother appeared, watching long enough to know exactly what had been said. Look at these two, she announced, her voice carrying warmth into every corner of the house. The family spilled out. Kai's laugh broke free, rough at the edges, almost disbelieving. He looked down at Noah, still kneeling. Tears slipped free, not from weakness, but from release. Yes, he whispered. Then louder, steadier. Yes. The house erupted with warmth, was clapping on shoulders, and smiles wide enough to hold the moment. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't whispered. It was claimed. By Noah, by Kai. Few weeks later in Sydney, the apartment was learning Kai and Noah slowly. Boxes still crowded the corners. A shirt hung over the back of a chair, and the coffee machine blinked like it knew they hadn't yet tamed it. Evening pressed against the windows, city lights rising in a scatter that never quite stopped moving. The door clicked. Noah stepped in, hair mussed from the day. His eyes softened the moment they found Kai. Noah leaned in, kissed him once, quick and tired, but sure, before tugging off his jacket. I need to shower. Don't start dinner without me. The bathroom door shut. Kai poured himself a mug and stepped out to the balcony. The city spread wide. The sound was a hum instead of a tide. But the wind still touched his face the way wind always did, asking nothing, promising nothing, just here. He wrapped both hands around the mug, and the thought slipped out of him before he could stop it. I thought I'd miss Eden every day, but right now, I don't. The ache was still there, low in his chest, but it didn't hollow him out the way he feared. It softened when he remembered Noah's grin. Kai picked up his phone. The hour in Eden was early enough. His mother answered almost at once. They chatted for a while, and then Kai said, I'll be there before Christmas. Smiling into the receiver. You need anything from Sydney? His mom's laugh came warm, certain. Just you, son. And Noah. When the call ended, the room felt steadier, like the walls had settled closer round him, less like borrowed space and more like home. Kai slipped back inside and walked toward the bedroom. Noah was already there, sprawled across the bed, bare skin against white sheets, towel abandoned at the footboard. He didn't speak. He just crooked a finger, the grin tugging at his mouth playful, unguarded. Kai's laugh caught in his throat, half nerves, half release. He closed the door softly behind him. The skyline glowed beyond the curtains, the city humming on. Inside, the rest of their life was waiting, unboxed, unpracticed, entirely theirs. Eden had shaped Kai and Noah. Its tide had taught them patience. Its storms had taught them resilience. And its silence had taught them how heavy longing could be. They had carried that weight for years. Sydney didn't erase what came before. It didn't ask them to forget the harbor that raised them, or the house that kept its door open. It only asked that they step forward, into noise, into light, into a horizon wide enough to hold more than one life. Ty and Noah brought Eden with them, not as an anchor to drag, but as a compass to guide. Each laugh across the dinner table, each glance under lamplight, each touch that lingered in the dark, all of it lived here too, in a city that didn't know their history, but was already part of their future. This was how love returned, not to the place it began, but to the people who chose to keep it alive, to the ones who said yes after years of waiting, to the men who would go back every winter, not as boys aching to belong, but as partners who had found a new belonging in each other. Thank you for listening to Salt in Our Veins. Subscribe, like, and follow for more stories. A new season is beginning, with new voices and new journeys waiting to be told. Once again, thank you for being here with us.